So, somewhat recently, I heard someone say this phrase: where words fail, music speaks. And at the time, I thought, well, that's a nice sounding phrase. Didn't think much more about it. And it is a nice sounding phrase. It even, holds music in pretty high regard. To say, well, it can do some things that the spoken word can't do. So, what's wrong with that? Well, my brain does this weird thing sometimes where I don't even realize it's holding on to things for some reason that I don't yet know. So months later, after I heard this, I found myself wondering about this phrase: where words fail, music speaks. And I started to think, why are you thinking about this? And eventually I realized, well, it's because I don't think it's actually true. What it is a really nice sounding phrase. It's like a pretty box with a nice bow on top, where we can hear it and think, oh, that's nice, and get the feel goods, and not give it another thought, and go on about our day. And that's exactly kind of the purpose that it served when I heard it. But the more I thought about it, I thought, this is not a true statement. And I think that's why I can't let it go. And then it got me on to thinking about a lot of other things involving music and the connection between somebody that plays music and somebody that listens to music. So, the reason why I think this phrase is untrue is because it implies that the function or a main function of music is to fill in the gaps of another language. And I believe that music is its own language. It functions all by itself. You could define music in a lot of different ways. What is music? But I believe that one of the things that it definitely is a language, and quite a unique one at that. And if something works well and very functionally in its original language, it's not going to work as well when you translate it. You can do your best, maybe you can get close, maybe you can convey some of the things, but it will not work as well as the very language that it was designed for. So I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, my mom would take us to church every Sunday. And something that I would hear preachers do from time to time is they would do some research from older, more original translations of the Bible. So instead of using the modern English, New International Version, they would look up the Greek version or the Hebrew translation. And they would see what they could find when they would compare the modern version to these older versions. And they would say things like, well, in our translation it uses this word. In the Hebrew version, they have 6 different words for this one word that we have. And each of those 6 words means something different. And they chose this particular one. And they would use that to say, I'm giving you more information. It gives you a more accurate idea. Maybe now you understand better what this verse is trying to tell you. Okay? And I would hear people use this method from time to time. The main example that comes to mind when I think about that is I heard someone talking about the very popular verse that states, "The meek shall inherit the earth." And he was saying, that just never made sense to me. For us to be, we're being told to be meek. Is that how we should be? So he researched that verse. And what he found was that the word meek was not a very accurate translation. His translation was someone who has a sharpened blade but keeps it sheathed. Keeps it in its holster. Does not use the sharpened blade. And that is very different than the word meek. So that is an example of, in original language, not being as effective in a different language. So now back to our phrase, where words fail, music speaks. Well, I would simply change the phrase to make it true. I would say, music speaks in ways that words cannot. And maybe that doesn't sound as pretty or as nice and tidy, but it is a true statement, because music doesn't need words. It doesn't need any other language. It's a language all on its own. And if we apply words to music, that can help us make an association. And it's not a bad place to start. But the deeper that you get into that, you may let go of doing that altogether. Music can express more feelings or emotions than we have names for. You don't need words to explain it, or to make it valid, or to make it this or that. It simply functions well enough and says what it wants to say better than any other language can say. So I'm saying, music is its own language, and it doesn't need to go hand in hand with another language for it to, be very powerful and have function. But what is the language of music? Now it leads me on to this question. How does the language of music work? And if I play music for you, or you play music for me, what's the communication? Do we need a certain level of commonalities between us? Do you need to understand my instrument for me to communicate with you musically? Do we need to have the same level of education, or the same preferences? Or do the same things need to be important to both of us for us to be able to say, yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down? How does that work? I hear people say all the time that they are not qualified to understand music. And many people are not willing to even try because they don't think that they can understand what's happening. They think they're lacking something. They haven't studied or haven't learned in order to, make a good go at understanding the language of music. And although I would definitely say that the more that you know, the more experience you have, the more details you can recognize, all those things definitely help you understand the language. They can enrich your experience. They can allow you to understand it on more and deeper levels. But I believe that music as a language functions in a very mysterious way, because we can't exactly put our finger on the connection that happens between us. And it is so much more vague than if we were to communicate with each other through the spoken word. But here's how I believe the language of music functions from person to person. It functions through the connection of two life experiences. So I play the classical guitar. The classical guitar is very sensitive, and you can put a lot into sound production. So when I play a piece, okay, obviously I have some goals in mind. I want the piece to go a certain way. I have to choose a sound. What kind of sound works well with the piece? What kind of movements am I going to do with the phrasing? Is it going to be kind of lively and rhythmic, like in tempo? Is it going to be kind of slow and emotional and using more rubato and things like that? What are my choices? Why am I going to make them? Well, I want to bring out certain things in the music. I want to bring out the things that I feel like are strengths of that piece. What kind of sounds am I going to choose? Well, I want to choose sounds that I think are strengths of the guitar I'm playing, and sounds that I think I can do as a player, sounds that work well with me. But, is there any more motivation than that? I mean, all that stuff is good and well, and it's all important, but what if I want motivation that's more important? Why am I going to do something? Well, I'll have a connection with a particular sound or a particular way to play a phrase. Why? Well, because I'll be thinking about this phrase makes me feel such and such type of emotion, a feeling, or this sound gives me a certain type of feeling, and I connect with that. Why? Well, because, something happened to me in my life that made me feel that way, and it's important to me. And that was something that taught me what this feeling is and what it feels like. So if I think about that, then it drives the sound choice, then it drives the phrasing. Okay, it puts me in a great spot to play music and to play it the best that I can and to make it as unique to me and as functional as it can be. And if you have an association with something that's very important to you, I believe you're much more likely to do it. And you're much more likely to make it work, because it's more than just saying, well, this is a good sound, or this is a nice piece or nice phrase. It's saying, I'm connecting this to something that happened to me, and it's really important because it's a big part of who I am. So this is what I put into the music, and now it's out there. Okay? Now you hear it. Now what happens? You hear something and it makes you feel something. So why did it make you feel something? Well, because it went a particular way. It had a certain amount of detail or a certain amount of movement that registered to you as, well, that sounds such and such kind of way. And it gives me a feeling. How do you know what that feeling is? Well, because of something that happened to you. Something that's really important to you. Something that made you who you are. Something that taught you, this is what this feeling means. And this is what it feels like. And that is how the language of music functions. Or at least, it is a powerful way that it functions. I can have a very specific mindset about where I'm coming from and then play. And you might not get any of the specifics about where I'm coming from. But if it's important enough to me to put as much of myself into the music as I can, based on, the motivation behind why I want to play what I'm playing, and I give you enough details for your brain to say, this is a functioning thing, here's how it sounds, it makes me feel a certain way because of my life experience. That is the connection. It's a connection from one person's life experience to someone else's life experience. And not just anything, but things that are vitally important to the foundation of who you are and how you feel like you've become who you are. And this is why, some people will listen to music and it will make them cry. It's not because the player tried to make them cry. It's not because the listener said, oh, I know exactly what they were saying and it was such a sad thing that I had to cry. It's because the listener connected it to something that happened to them in their life. And that's what made them cry. It conjured up something that was very, very important to them. And that's what brought up all that emotion. So, we can say words to each other and get very specific reactions. I could say something to make you angry, or I could say something to make you happy, or a number of different things. I don't believe the language of music really works in that way, but it is extremely functional and better in some ways at allowing for a connection between two people's life experiences. If you've ever had trouble connecting with someone, maybe you feel like you don't know them well enough, so you don't want to share important information about yourself. That makes sense to me. I feel that way all the time. It's kind of a barrier that I have to get past. Oh, but what if I play music for them though? Well, that's way different, because I don't have to say anything that's personal information about me. I just have to be coming from a place that's fundamentally important to who I am. And if they're willing to pay attention and they're willing to try, they can be affected by it, and they're affected by it based on their life experience. So you can still have a genuine, beneficial connection with someone that maybe you don't even know well, and you don't even have to specify it more than that. I mean, that is definitely part of the power of music and something that it can do. And for people that say, well, I don't understand music, so I don't know what to think about it, you're just missing out on the opportunity. If you're just willing to say, how does this make me feel? Then you can participate in the experience. And I don't believe you necessarily need a certain type of qualified listener. I gotta say, I'm a musician, and some of the worst people to play music for in general are musicians. I'm not sure why this is, because these are the people that have more ability to pick up on more details about what you're doing than anyone else. But way more often than not, musicians have no desire to pay attention to you when you play music for them. So it doesn't matter what capability they have, it's not going to be used. They have no interest in paying attention. So I'm not going to play for people like that. I would much rather play for someone that would pay attention and is willing to engage in that experience. And it doesn't matter if they think they know about music or if they don't. If they're willing to pay attention and they're willing to just open themselves up to discovering something about the language of music, that's what I want. And I would rather play for someone like that any day of the week. And I'll go ahead and wrap up by telling a story about one of my most favorite performances that I've ever given. And you might think it's like, oh, I played some big concert hall or had a lot of people there or whatever. And no, it's nothing like that. One of the most treasured and favorite performances that I've ever given was at a retirement home. And I took the gig. It was just kind of a normal type of gig. I didn't think a lot of it. But I go there and I'm playing classical guitar for these people. And they were really great listeners. They were quiet. They paid attention. And so I was enjoying myself. And as I played, people that were there started to cry. And I thought about that after the concert, and I realized, it wasn't the playing that made them cry. I mean, I'm not saying there was something wrong with the playing. Hopefully the playing was fine. But it wasn't like I played a piece so beautifully that it made them cry. That wasn't it. These are people that are at the end of their life. They're close to dying. And they're in a place where none of us know what that is like until it's our time to be there. So who knows what's going through their mind? Who knows how they're feeling, what they're dealing with? And something about the music that they heard that day connected with them, brought up some feelings that they were dealing with, and then they cried. And you can just imagine all kinds of things. Just thinking about death in general, knowing that it's like right next door. You've lived almost your whole life and you're at the end. Well, that's enough to make you cry. Maybe thinking about loved ones that they've lost, husbands and wives, or brothers and sisters, or friends that are no longer here. Maybe they have family members that don't come to see them and they miss them. Maybe they don't have any family left. I mean, who knows? But it really struck me as a powerful experience. And all it took was someone wanting to play and put their experience into music, and then a listener that was willing to pay attention and have just an honest and true, kind of unfiltered reaction, and take that wherever they needed to take it. And I will remember that for the rest of my life, because it had a big impact on me. And I used to kind of think more like, well, if you sold a bunch of tickets and played a big time concert, that's success. That's something good. Or, if you got a high profile job or whatever, that's success. That's something good. But I realized this is just very different. It's a very different kind of success. And it's using the things that you can do as a musician in a very beneficial way. And I'm not great with words. I'm not great with social settings. I would not have been able to go into this retirement home and talk to all these people and have interactions with them that were meaningful. I'm just not really built that way. I'm not good at that. But I can play the guitar. I'm good at that. And through the power of the language of music, we were able to have that connection that was so impactful on them, from just a pure stranger that they'd never seen before, that it made them cry. So that is an example of the potential that music has when it functions as its own language. So that's the only reason why I would say music doesn't speak where words fail. Okay, that might sound nice, but it's just not the truth. The truth is that music says things words cannot say, because music is its own language, and you can't say anything better in another language than you can say in music, if that is the way that it was intended to be said.